Well, welcome to Just an Hour, a conversation about ideas. This is the last Just an Hour of the semester. And, I think you and I have been doing this now for a couple of semesters, like a year and a half now. And I think participation has been fabulous. It's been really a great run. So really appreciate that. This is, the Just an Hour sessions are a collaboration between the three vice deans. That's Betty, myself, and Gustavo, who is sort of acting associate dean for global engagement when Iveta is on sabbatical. Couple of quick announcements. You should have received an email from the provost about the ASU Future of Learning Community Festival, also known as Folk Fest. Seats are vanishing very quickly, so if you have an opportunity to sign up, register for it, please do so. They have a pretty limited number, and we are also from the Learning Futures Collaborative around AI. We are looking at submitting a couple of things there, panels and things that way, so it might be fun. Aisha Boyce sent me an email yesterday recommending a talk that's coming up in February with Dr. Eileen Reed from UNC Greensboro around centering equity in research and evaluation in an AI world. More details about that will be coming soon, but just wanted to flag that for all of us. Also, the My Education Hub, we always make a shout out to that because it is somewhere where we have, like Derek has put in a lot of effort in building in a lot of resources and support for faculty. So it's my.education.asu.edu. And of course, there is a scholarship roundup survey, which I will drop a link to that in the chat, which we would love for us to fill in, so that keeps us informed and the marketing team informed about things that work that you've been doing that we would like to publicize. Betty, do you want to introduce the episode and our guest host today?
Yeah, so thanks so much for the introduction and announcements, Punya. So today's topic, we thought it would be timely to wrap up the semester with a discussion of how various folks in the college in particular have been using Gen AI, particularly in their teaching, although I don't think exclusively in that arena either. It is hard to believe it was really just a year ago that ChatGPT was released for public use. I guess it was November 30th, 2022. And certainly it was news to me, and I think for a lot of other people. And yet now we use terms like ChatGPT, Bard, Bing Chat, DallE. I can't say that I use stable diffusion a lot in my everyday language, although maybe some of you do. But over the last year, I think a lot of folks have been either cautiously exploring, or others have been jumping in with a little less caution and a lot more enthusiasm. And it seems now a good time for us to sort of take some stock, share collectively what we've been doing, and particularly for those folks who are new to or even haven't tried any of these tools, get some new ideas for what we might want to consider doing next, or just staying informed and trying to keep on top of the developments in this area. So as a change of pace today, Jennifer Werner has agreed to step in as our guest host, if you will. She's prepared some discussion prompts, and we've invited a group of folks here to talk about their experiences. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you, and maybe, I think everybody here knows you, but maybe if you could start with a short introduction to yourself and maybe your interest in Gen AI, and then kick us off with a discussion.
Absolutely. So thank you. I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk to everybody about this. This is a topic that's been in the forefront of what I've been working on for the past year now. So my name is Jen Warner. I'm a senior instructional designer for Office of Digital Learning, and I have had the utmost pleasure of being able to talk to all about how to use it in your courses and how to connect our team with your courses in this. So today we have 5 people who have been doing a lot of great work in this space. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. First, we're going to start off with Janelle. You knew you were going to be my first one.
Well, hello. I knew it. I was like, she's going to go to me first. And fittingly, you are right next to me on the screen, too. So I was like, I wonder if I'm next to you on yours. So my name is Janelle White-Taylor. I'm a faculty member here in Mary Lou Fulton. I've also coordinated Ed Studies. I'm going to be talking today about EDT 180, which is a course that I oversee. And we're a large online course. We serve over 500 students each semester. So I'll share more about what we've been doing in that course.
Jim, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Jim Dunnigan. I'm an instructor in the EDD Ed Leadership doctoral program. And I teach a couple courses in that program. And I'm going to share a couple of ways I've used it with my students to kind of explore how ChatGPT can expand our horizon with research.
Great. Thank you. Steve, you're up next.
I'm Steve Salick. I am a faculty member here in the college, and I am one of the program coordinators for the Learning Design and Technology program. I also coordinate a couple of certificate initiatives we have in an undergraduate concentration, and I'm going to talk about how we have integrated some of these Gen AI technologies actually into the courses we're teaching.
Fantastic. Thank you. Carl, it's your turn.
Hey, everybody. I'm Carl Hermans, a clinical professor in the leadership program, and I'll share a little bit about how we're just getting started with all of this, how we played with it in the summer intensive, and some insight that we gained in a cross-curricular course we're teaching this fall in democratic education.
Thank you so much. Kyle.
Hi, everyone. Kyle Wagner, Senior Instructional Designer with the Office of Digital Learning. I'm going to be talking a little bit about using generative AI in my own experiments to create game mechanics that can be incorporated into lesson plans, and just thinking conceptually about how we work with the tool and using it as a proof of concept engine.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. So let's start off with a couple of questions. So the first question I wanted to ask everybody is, and we'll just kind of go around in like a panel. We don't have to go in the same order that we did. I won't make Janelle go first every time. But just kind of jump in when you have an answer you'd like to share. So the first question I want to talk about is, what prompted you to consider using generative AI in your teaching or your work?
I think one of the things that prompted me to do it is it's a lot easier to hop on the train when it's just getting started as opposed to going full speed. I've been to those meetings where the angry fist-shaking faculty are, where they're going to cheat. That's all they're going to use it for. And I don't think that's a beneficial way of looking at it, because having been involved with these technologies for more years than I'd like to admit, this battle was lost before it even began. So there's no way you're going to be able to hedge against these technologies from any angle, whether you're using it as a faculty, whether your students are going to use it, or whether it's going to be part of your core course.
Yes, one of the reasons why.
No, you're right. Go ahead.
So one of the reasons why I started with it, for those of you that know me, within EDT 180, it's a large tech course. It's designed as an introductory tech course. So I thought we would be missing the boat and really not doing our students a serious disservice if we didn't talk about AI and sharing some of the ways you can use it, the good, the bad, the different. So we really looked at, how do we introduce this topic? How do we share not everything, but how do we give them a good overview of what they can use AI for, and what are the good things that they can use it for? I think the other side for me was, like Steve mentioned, jumping on that train early. I think I'm an early adopter on all things tech because I think I'm a super tech nerd, but I love the fact that with a lot of these tools, you can do different things. And I wanted to make sure that we were able to put a positive spin on what we're able to do versus a negative spin.
Yeah, I would echo both what Steve and Janelle said. I've lived through a couple of these technology transitions, of those you remember the DOS to Windows transition many years ago, and it was really clear to me by January of last year that this was on a trajectory that was not going to stop. And I just like what Janelle said, that I think we need a lot of people that are positive on the side of this. I know there was a lot of negative that came out against, plagiarism and stuff, which is still a valid concern, of course. But I think we need a lot of people that are really doing some deep thinking on this to make a positive influence in education. And I think it's moving so rapidly. We have to stay on top of this to really make a difference with our students.
So for us, for the Ed Leadership faculty in the master's program for principal preparation, we became intrigued with this later last spring. In K-12 world, there was already conversations going on about this. How are we going to deal with this? What's going to happen with this? We, of course, were already hearing about it from students at the higher ed level in our programs. And so we decided that we just wanted to play with it. And as we were getting ready for our summer intensive, Joetta Gonzalez, one of my co-instructors for the summer intensive, started playing with it, coming to program meetings, etc. And so we did experiment with it during the summer then.
Yeah, in the case of the experiments that I had run, they're kind of the impetus for that was really to think about what the potential was for this to be able to be used for adaptive learning. Whether that be in specifically mathematics, which was a subject that I struggled with when I was much younger, and a lot of games that I had already been working on prior to coming into ASU on my own time, but then also exploring how it could be used to improve or provide more opportunity for like interdisciplinary learning among various different subjects. So that's kind of what drove me to start playing with it on my own time.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so just real quick, I realized that I didn't really talk about the format real quick. I just have some questions we're going to go around in the same panel way that we just did. If you have any questions for the panel or any questions you would like to have discussed at all, just drop them into the chat or unmute and we can just have a conversation. So with that, let's go on to our next question. So the next question I had is what kind of tools are you using right now and what ways are you using them?
So I'll start out on this because I'm probably the most remedial, or our program is, of all the folks here. We're just getting started, but we have started playing with ChatGPT, and during the summer, we experimented with it with our students, sort of metacognition kind of thing. We just talked to the students and asked them what they were experiencing already in K-12 and wanted to take a little time to play with it as we started to interrogate the purpose of education and how people learn. And so for how people learn best, we basically just asked Chat a number of prompts, and I'll just go through this very, very quickly. But we just started, okay, so for philosophy of learning, we should probably understand how people best learn. So let's ask Chat. And so he's asked, how do people learn best? And of course, ChatGPT in 2 seconds laid out about 7 different areas around that all actually, sometimes ChatGPT, as we know, makes stuff up, but in this case, it seemed all pretty credible. So then we, said thanks, and Chat said, you're welcome, glad I could help. And then we asked if John Dewey has any insight into this. And of course, then Chat came out and listed 6 or 7 areas where John Dewey did contribute to that around experiential learning, conceptual learning, active engagement, all that kind of business. And then we said, okay, well, let's extend this. How do children learn best? To see if there was any difference there. And there was a little bit of difference. They brought up play-based learning, things like that. And then finally, and this was the last thing that was interesting and useful for us, we said, okay, so can you cite educational philosophers and research that support all of these principles and categories that you just described? And Chat said, of course. And then Chat came out and put in a bunch, they brought up under each category, they cited both philosophers and research around it. So we, Vygotsky, Dewey, Piaget, Montessori, Howard Gardner, Maxine Greene, all of that, which for the purposes of the summer intensive, we weren't going to delve into that deeply, but for the teachers and for us, it showed how Chat could be used as a starting point to allow us to think about this, to interrogate it, and then to go down to the rabbit hole of all those different citations around the different folks of interest to us. So that's how we used it.
Yeah,
Well, when we integrate, I'm looking at this, I'm here to speak about this from the perspective of integrating it into our courses. And when we tend to integrate tools into our courses, we kind of pick a tool that we're going to provide instruction on, as it were. So for example, if we wanted them to edit audio files, we would put Audacity in as the tool that we expect students to use. However, we always have a caveat. If you're more comfortable with Adobe Audition, you're free to use that because it's about the end product, not necessarily the mechanics of producing the thing. So in the case of the LDT program, when we integrate these tools into our courses, we specify ChatGPT, we specify Firefly, whatever tool it might be for that assignment. But then there's also a caveat. Hey, if you're more comfortable using Claude AI, that's perfectly fine.
So knowing that EDT 180 is a tech course, I'll preface it by saying that. So we're very heavy into what we've done. On the instructional side, we really looked at, I'm always trying to find another way for students to watch the videos or a creative way for them to think about their readings. So we started off with Dewey, John Dewey's, we have a kind of a thread running throughout the entire course on the impulses. So we wanted to really think about how can we get students to read and to listen to what, how John Dewey can impact a technology course. So we started off with some of the basic things we had already found and, had put together in the course, fed those into ChatGPT, and then at the same time asked ChatGPT and Perplexity to add to it. So that way we ended up with more information. And then we turned it into a script. So having ChatGPT come up with a 2-person script, fed the script into a program called Colossan, which is a video-based AI. So you get these characters that you kind of design, you figure out which character you want, you can have them speak and interact. So we created videos instead of myself or someone else from the course creating videos. We had these wonderful AI videos. And really the goal was to see how many students would watch those videos. So we noticed that more students watched the videos than they normally would. A new tool, well, Vyond is not a new tool, but they recently came out with an AI piece as well. So we tried for the last one, we added some Vyond videos. And students were really excited about that. The only thing I hate about those, there's a gigantic watermark in the middle of it because we don't own the program. So, students still watched it more than listening to me talk, which I don't know if I'm offended by that yet. But on the instructional side, that's where some of the things that we did. On the student side, we incorporated AI into several different areas. First, we have a study that's running through the course that is really exciting. It looks at the students' use, their knowledge, and their understanding of AI. So it was nice to see kind of across the board what students are thinking and feeling. We also introduced kind of the historical perspective of what AI is and bringing it forward to ChatGPT Perplexity, and then giving them tools that they have to go out and kind of play with and learn something from. We also have them, there's an assignment where they're dissecting a podcast. All the podcasts that they review are on AI as well. So they have to learn more about AI and how students are using AI. We take them through a graphic piece where they're using Midjourney, Firefly, DallE, and I'm forgetting something else, but there's 4 that they have to go through. They also have to go through music to design some sort of music score. The last assignment is their podcast where they have to design a script with ChatGPT or Perplexity to kind of outline or to go through a full script for their podcast. So we've really embraced it to try to figure out, to give them ways of using the tools in a variety of ways so that way they learn how to use them. At the same time, we talk a little about the ethical side of, you're still the creative driver. Like the tool is there to assist you, but you are the person that you're going to interact with that tool. So throughout, we talk about how do you interact with it and how do you work with those tools.
Well, that's a smorgasbord of tools there. Janelle's at the top end of our deal here. I want to outline a couple things before I describe very briefly what I've been doing. For those of you that might be new, you hear a lot of terms like ChatGPT, Bing Chat, Perplexity. Essentially, what's happening is you've got Bing on the Microsoft platform, which really has ChatGPT 4.0 embedded for free. Oftentimes we talk about GPT 4.0 as the premium product, but it does cost money for that. So students don't typically have that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I really appreciate what Carl said in terms of how he was using that, the baby steps of getting into ChatGPT, in the sense that it was really good for developing that list of, educational philosophers and researchers. That's wonderful. When it gets to the citations, it gets a little sketchy, right? Because it's not as reliable. However, if you're using a product like perplexity.ai, and we should put that in the chat, or Bing for that matter, you can actually get the direct links to sources of information. Sometimes you can get a much better list from perplexity.ai or Bing. With my students in the EDD program, I had them use perplexity.ai as a front-end generative AI tool that they can actually go and do some research on educational theories and try to compare them and contrast them and kind of use that as a preliminary piece. It's not the only source. It's just a way to kind of start that conversation. They can put in their problem of practice for their research and say, what theories might align with this and what theories might be in contrast to this. So it's not the be-all, end-all tool, but a great way to get them all started in doing that. And the second way I've done that is I brought ChatGPT. We had a discussion last week. This was a live in-person class, and we were discussing an article on CRT and pedagogy and some other ideas. And I had the students discussing that, and I had ChatGPT as another member of our discussion group. And I posed some questions to ChatGPT and said, well, what do you think about this? And what would the author think about this? And it was really fascinating to see the students have a conversation and then say, let's see what maybe we missed or we didn't find some connections. And they were really intrigued by that as another member of our discussion group. And not to say that it led the discussion or it had the answers, but it was really more of, here's another member, let's have our discussion. Now let's see what maybe some holes that we didn't see or some connections that we didn't make. And it was really quite fascinating. Everybody left feeling like this is a really worthwhile tool. Again, to augment your learning, enhance your learning, not replace it in that sense.
Yeah, I have to agree completely with Jim. And that's really the way that I've begun thinking about a lot of the experiments that I've been running, because while it has been able to do a lot, there's also limitations to what it can do. And those are opportunities for the instructor or a K-12 teacher to jump in and kind of fill in the gaps, essentially. So to still use this as a way to drive more immersion and more engagement with learning experiences, but at the same time have an opportunity for the instructor to be the person who's providing the overall structure and content. In the case of the way that I've been using it, primarily using ChatGPT, the 4.0, but then also adding a number of different plugins to it. And that's provided me an opportunity to explore how I can incorporate some of those plugins into the game mechanics. So for example, this could be anything like having something like a series of images that are automatically generated by it through its connection to DallE whenever somebody levels up in the game, for example. But those very same kinds of examples could be used in a learning experience with students.
Yeah, this is all the great things that I heard around all of you talking about this. And so I'm glad that you were able to come and share all of that with us. The next couple of questions, I'm going to kind of combine them because I want to make sure that we have enough time to get everybody's answers and then also get some time in for questions. So the next question I have for you is, what kind of challenges or what kind of challenges did you have when you were, integrating these type of technologies, and what surprised you the most about them?
Generative AI is bad at math.
You ended up having to do some interesting things with, did you end up working with Wolfram on that, Kyle, or how did you end up fixing that?
Yeah, so that was one of the theories going into getting 4.0, was that I could go ahead and incorporate the Wolfram plugin, which is basically a game or a mathematics engine, essentially. It's still not great at math. So that was definitely a surprise to me. But again, this is where I think back to kind of like what Jim was saying a few minutes ago, not necessarily leaning on it too heavily. And I think we all know that at this point, between hallucinations and things that it's just not great at, where does that situate the person who's driving the learning for the students? So, yeah.
Steve, how about you? What were your challenges and
excuse me, technically I didn't really have any challenges or surprises. Again, I've been working with this stuff for years and years and years. I mean, in terms of how I'd like to integrate it, those things could work smoother. I prefer a way for example, to embed ChatGPT directly into Canvas so that there's no, they're not traveling all around. But one of the things I think we forget, given the age and the general, mindset of our students and our target audience, is that they do have a lot of anxiety about these technologies. And I think it's important to remember that and bear in mind. I had sent a link out to the learning. I'll find the link in a second. I sent a learn out. There had been an article in Faculty Focus about this. So it's important to help find a couple of ways to tamp down the anxiety of that. And one of the things I've discovered is that when they're just left at ChatGPT and told to do something, just asking a question and getting ChatGPT to respond is difficult. So when we integrate this into a course, and we built essentially just one module for this so that it's the same across all courses, is we provide them with some very basic training and information about prompt engineering before they're required to take on the assignment. And what we found is that really does, for those of them who view that content and read it, it does significantly improve the quality of what they're turning in.
I would say one of my biggest challenges is finding the tool that I want to use, because there are so many out there. And I think a lot of us I shouldn't say waste a lot of time trying to figure out the tool, playing with tools, and then sometimes, selecting a tool that doesn't really do what you want it to do, or after you've made it beautiful, then it's a cost to either move it or to use it in the way you were planning to use it. So I think that's probably one of my biggest challenges, is time, and I'm going to say the money to spend on all these tools that are out there. The same, I would have to echo what Steve just mentioned with students. I think as we've introduced more and more tools to students, there was that hesitancy about, I don't want to put my information into this. I don't want to share my email address, and, telling students right off, please don't pay for anything. Do not put your credit card into anything that, we're looking at, because these tools are changing so quickly that as we go in and look at them, they may be free, but 2 weeks later, they may not be free. So that's one of the hardest things that we've had to face, is helping students get over that hurdle of, you've got to try it. A lot of students feel it's cheating to use it, and talking to them about what does it mean to take it full stock versus interacting with it. So I think those are probably the biggest pieces that I've seen that would be listed as challenges, I would say.
To what Janelle just mentioned, I would also suggest or insist, I guess, that the provost has put out a document with 3 kind of categories of use for Gen AI that are approved language for your syllabus. And I think it's really important to include the appropriate statement about Gen AI use in your course, in your syllabus, and use whatever paragraph the provost approved.
Yeah, I want to echo both what Steve said and what Janelle said in terms of the cheating. I think as a faculty, one of the challenges I think is literally to actually have the conversation with your students, is to bring it up, because you do have this notion that about tools that can do things. In some cases, you've got an assignment that you go, boy, AI can really knock this assignment out pretty quickly. And so it's kind of like you've got this little hidden secret, and the students are all using it, they are. And you have this kind of this tension between, they feel like maybe they're kind of cheating, and you feel like, boy, should I really be providing all of this information? It's now going to make my assignments maybe a little less critical thinking if AI can do some of it. So I think having the conversation, I've been on discussions with K-12 teachers who have the same conversation with 5th graders. Say, look, let's sit down and talk about this, right? So I think one of the biggest things you can do as a faculty member is actually have the conversation, because they are using it, they will be using it, and it's going to become ubiquitous. It'll be embedded in, or is now being embedded in, Microsoft Office and Google Docs. So it's no longer this entity that sits on the side. And just having the conversation about how they use it, what are the best uses, like Carl talked about, maybe the citations are not going to be so good, so you don't want people making things up. But I think it's just starting with that conversation and really having a frank conversation about what's out there, what can you use, what's appropriate. I know we're even building in language in our dissertations where students will identify the tools they use and how they used AI, because it's going to become a reality.
Yeah, one other thing I'll just tag on what Jim said is if you think you have a pretty good idea that they're using it, you're probably wrong. Even the Gen AI detection things have turned out to be pretty poor. Even the best ones are pretty poor. The other thing is a student who is savvy with these tools and knows how to prompt them, they can output an essay that's less than perfect. I had a discussion with another faculty member who said, "Oh, well, I can tell because it writes in such a generic way." And I generated a couple of other papers for him that were on the same topic. And no, he couldn't tell because you can ask it to assume the role of a seventh grader and write in that way and say misspellings are okay. So yeah, you can prompt it to do less than perfect work as well.
Carl, what have you found?
I guess building on what Jim and also Steve was just saying, I can share just a very quick example of that we encountered this fall from a pedagogical standpoint. I'm co-teaching a course on democratic education with Daniel Shabrinsky, and it's cross-listed between us and justice studies in school transformation. And one of our students is a woman who had been a university student in Afghanistan and escaped from Afghanistan and now is finishing her degree here. So her English is very kind of remedial, just beginning with that. And it was clear that in some of her concept briefs and things that she was using ChatGPT. It was very clear. And so actually we asked her about it and she said, yeah, that she was doing that. And so Daniel and I tried to think about for her the final presentation for the course was a two-part presentation. One was a class presentation on, that was a culminating learning demonstration, pulling together all the things about democratic education, but then embedding in it your own personal educational interest. So within the context of democratic education, she did a very nice job on the class presentation, but again, it was clearly organized by chat. So for the written component, which in her case, she wanted to do an elaboration in a formal paper of her presentation, Daniel and I tried to think about how can we give her an opportunity to insert her authentic voice into this? And so what we did is in the introduction, we essentially asked her to just take a paragraph or two to describe her own experience in Afghanistan's educational system. And the reason that she chose her individual interest was social justice and moral education in democratic schools. And so we asked her, given her experience in Afghanistan's education system, why? Why did you choose that as your topic of interest? So that would be her introduction. Then the body of it would essentially be a written elaboration of what she had done in her presentation. But then to conclude, again, we wanted to give her the opportunity and also to hear her own authentic voice, to see how she was synthesizing all of this. So we asked her to imagine, for the conclusion, when she goes back to Afghanistan, if she were the Minister of Education there, we asked her to imagine the extent to which she could incorporate her vision for social justice and moral education into Afghanistan's education system, why she felt it would be important to do so, and what challenges she might face and what realistic opportunities there might be for doing that. So by doing that, we wanted to embed it in her personal experience and ensure that she was using her own voice and not chat around that. So that's the way we're trying to play with that a little bit.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so we've talked, the next question I have is about student response to all of these tools. I know we've talked a lot about that already, about how students are interacting with it. What, does anybody have any specific points they would like to make about the student response on this?
I think one of the things I just want to highlight from what Carl just said is if you're worried about your students actually using these tools to create things that really aren't their own, it's really generated from ChatGPT or any of the other chatbots, you really have to take that moment to really listen to that student's voice. You've got to design some assignments around ways that they're talking and that you can hear directly from them to where it isn't generated by a chatbot. And I think that's what's helped us in other classes in ed studies when we've seen students that are generating these wonderful essays, and you're like, one, it doesn't talk about exactly what we asked you for, and two, it doesn't sound like you. So I think going back to the earlier assignment where we actually had them write out something smaller, you get a chance to see how they write, how they talk. And that really helped us as we were moving further, because as Steve mentioned, there aren't any detection tools that are going to help you say, okay, this was generated by a chatbot. So I think the one thing that I've learned through all of just this whole area and looking at other courses where students have had, they're like, I don't want to write the essay, so I'm going to have ChatGPT do it. What saved us is having that other assignment where they either emailed us, they wrote out something else where we got a chance to see their writing and then comparing it. So think about just things to, keep in the back of your mind as you're designing things and as these tools become more and more prevalent.
Yeah, just kind of adding on to what Janelle was saying, since we worked together on EDT 180, one of the most obvious signs is that passive voice, that the content from the AI it's almost a giveaway. And so thinking about how we can ask students to, express their ideas about the content that they're learning and how it would apply to their specific context can be a way to kind of aid in having them think a little bit more deeply, and at the same time produce content that not only asks them essentially for their own experiences, but makes it potentially a little bit more difficult for them to just use a chatbot to generate the content. At the same time, I've seen a lot of students that have given feedback that even they are worried about the idea of cheating, because a lot of our students are going to become teachers themselves. So they share a lot of the same concerns that we do.
So one of the reasons we went all in on this very early on in the process, and we already had started our plan to integrate these tools into our courses back when ChatGPT came on the scene a year ago. And the reason is because from the very get-go, there were thought leaders in the learning design, the instructional design space writing about these technologies and writing about the impact they were going to have on this discipline. And we pretty quickly decided to situate this in the context of using it within the discipline, and the language we settled on in all cases is as a design partner. And that even though these tools are very flexible and can do a lot of things, and this was one of the most recent assignments that they had, even though these tools can do a lot of things, it still takes a lot of intent and a lot of, intelligence to make the tools work in the way you want it to create what you want it to. And in the most recent assignment they had, in one of our courses, they had to create a 3-minute intro video to a body of instructional content, but all the stuff in the video had to be created with AI. And one of the things they learned was that it was extremely difficult to get AI to create everything exactly the way they needed it to meet the specifications of the project. So it's also about teaching the students how to manage and manipulate these technologies with intent to get results that are going to be useful and effective. And in the most recent exercise, what they had to do was actually, they were randomly assigned one of 10 endangered species, and they had to generate a 3-minute story, and they had to give the story a voice with AI. They had to generate the story with AI. They had to generate all the images and assemble all of that into a 3-minute video. But a lot of them, didn't listen kind of to the instruction prompts. So their videos were just kind of a mishmash of images that didn't make sense. The people who actually, read the assignment instructions and listened carefully to what the project manager was saying, theirs were really good.
Yeah, I think students are, I'll make it really quick. I think students are very anxious about it. I know in doctoral graduate students, integrity, integrity is true obviously for all students in higher education, but those that are in the courses that I'm teaching, they're very concerned about not crossing that line on the ethical issues of plagiarism, those things. They know that the stakes are very high. So I think, one of the things I tell them is that AI should not be writing for you. It should be writing with you. And if you're starting with your own work and then having it critique your work, I think that is a great place to start with. But if you're having it generate everything from the very beginning, it's pretty difficult to get it back into your own words. But if you start with your own words and have it kind of work with you as a mentor, as a tutor, that's a good place to start as well.
I just want to mention real quick, from looking at the assignments that we received this semester, their podcast assignments where they had to use the script or the outline with AI were more organized than I've seen in the past. Their pictures were phenomenal. Like their graphics that they came up with for their podcast cover art was the best ever. And it actually represented like the topic in their podcast. In the past, we've gotten like weird pictures. I'm like, what is this? Like, where did you find this? And it was interesting that most students, they cited it because we had them cite it. They had to cite, which tool they used, what prompt they came up with. And what they put in was really creative. I thought they would just throw in random stuff to get something really quick, but the images were amazing. And they used a variety of the tools, anywhere from, not as many on Stable Diffusion, but from DallE, Midjourney, Firefly. They really took to those. It was really interesting to listen to their music. Usually on the music part of the podcast, they would fail it miserably. Like there was so many copyright infringements that we were like, what is happening? Like we would have like half of a song. And I'm like, we asked you for like 10 seconds. But this semester, it was more spot on. So we did change some other things with the course, but it was nice to see that the music was originally AI Sense. But it was a different look than what we've seen in the past. Looking at the survey results from the students, they expressed, some fear of where AI was going, what AI would look like for them in the future. And, just to think back to one of our earlier conversations about the syllabus, a lot of students, I want to say over 70% of the students said that there was no mention in the syllabus about AI or what was expected within AI. So I think that points in again to us as faculty. Steve put the links in there. Make sure that you have a note in your syllabus around AI because students are wondering what does that look like and how can they use it for the future.
I would also, I just wanted to tag on to one thing Janelle said, which is I've also, I've had some experience where these technologies have helped students build confidence in their abilities because some of the things they're able to output, like she specifically talked about art, and the same was true with the videos they made for me, is it builds their confidence because I hate to say it this way, but it's like an easy win. It lowers the bar a little bit for what good looks like, I guess would be a way of putting it. But it helps them later on in the course, I've found, execute other assignments that don't involve generative AI, execute those a little better as well.
Yeah, just to add on to both what Janelle and Steve have said, with something like the podcast assignment that Janelle mentioned in EDT 180, so it's a composite assignment where there's multiple different elements, but the core of it is still the content that they have created and they've conceptualized. And so these are just kind of additions that they're able to leverage. But what's really nice is that we also include reflections with a lot of these different assignments. And so we're able to see between the reflections and what they've produced with the AI, kind of, we've been able to still see what their thinking is behind it. So even if they weren't in the past able to produce what they really wanted, it doesn't mean that they didn't have the understanding of what they wanted. They just didn't necessarily have the technical ability to put it all together. Whereas now this gives them that opportunity.
Yeah. No, these are all great. I kind of want to bring in some audience participation here and see if we can see if anybody, I know we've got a lot of faculty here who have used AI in their course or have been have some experience with it. Would there be anybody willing to talk a little bit about how they've used it?
I mean, I can say what I'm doing next if you're interested.
Yeah, go on with what you're doing next.
So next, we're going to be integrating some generative AI exercises into the applied project course. The applied project course is the capstone for the Learning Design Technologies program. And really what the student role in this course is they assume the role of a learning design and technology consultant, and then they're responsible for taking a project from conception to completion, and it involves the students going out into the real world and finding real world projects. So we have projects from all over the place. We've had them from hospital systems, from electronics manufacturers. We had some copper smelter projects. So there's a wide variety of things they do. But one thing they have to do as part of developing their project is write a statement of work. And a statement of work in the context of the course is essentially a legally binding contract, which tells, where they negotiate between themselves and the stakeholder about what the project's going to entail, what deliverables they're going to deliver, and all of that. So the next phase of that will be to integrate generative AI into that assignment. So what they have to do is, after the statement of work is signed, they're going to have to go back and forth. We've written a prompt. I've written a prompt for them, but I'll have to go back and forth in this iterative conversation where ChatGPT will play the role of the project stakeholder, and they're arguing that they want more stuff, to be added to the project. And the student has to essentially hold the line in this contract negotiation. And then at the end of the negotiation, I think I specified like 8 or 10 turns. At the end of that negotiation, the ChatGPT is going to do an analysis of how they did in terms of holding a line and, maintaining their position about what's already been promised for the deliverables. And then they're going to take that analysis, ChatGPT's analysis, and that'll become the topic for the discussion for that unit of the course.
All right. Well, we have about 10 minutes for questions and all the things. I do have one kind of wrap up question that I'm going to ask the panel, but I want to take questions from the audience first. So let's do that. Who's got questions about anything they heard or anything about AI and education, really?
Well, Jen, you and I had talked a little bit about some of the work that you had been doing towards your doctoral thesis and the opportunity for something like this to be used as an effective training tool for things like, working with special education and developing IEPs, for example, and essentially turning these into bots that are trained into certain personas that can, kind of run a scenario with a student teacher. And I think that there's still a lot of opportunity to explore something like that. But yeah, I would say that, with something like that as an example, are there other, ways that it can be plugged into your content so that students have an opportunity to work with it, kind of in the way that Punya had mentioned, where it could be difficult conversations, or it could be complex topics or complex interactions between teachers, students, and even potentially parents, for example, and trying to provide an experience that's a little bit more immersive for students before they actually get into the field.
Yeah, Kyle, I just want to build on what you said. I think the most powerful sort of role-playing conversations I've had are with when I ask the bot to take on the persona of a student who has a misconception. And it is phenomenal as a way of like, you're just butting your heads, and you can give them different personas. They can be like a funny dude, so who's going to crack a joke at everything you say. And you're like, how do I get the idea of natural selection by, to you when you have a teleological view, or you have a mistaken idea of how fractions work or something like that. And that it's very enlightening, and you can just keep doing it over and over, and you're practicing different strategies. And at the end of it, GPT will give you some feedback on things. It's actually quite insightful as a process of reflection on your own pedagogical techniques or possibilities that way.
Another area I'm experimenting with is how to help it to provide support for neurodivergent students. So I've had my fair share of students, and I'm sure you all do, who, for example, have trouble comprehending the assignment instructions. And in those cases, what I've been doing is I've been helping them by writing prompts that let them send the assignment instructions, copy them, and paste them into ChatGPT, and then have ChatGPT break it down into a series of micro steps in checklist format to help them negotiate the assignment. Mm-hmm. And for the particular person I'm working with right now, that's been fairly successful.
I can talk a little bit about the work that Kyle had mentioned about. So there's a couple of different things that I've been looking at in my own work with. We've been using trying to fix the idea of like discussion boards when there's no prompts for anybody to respond to. So we've been using generative AI to try and get some prompts up on the board right away so people can start having those like critical conversations. I've also created a couple of different scenario like videos where in one of our courses, it's a group project where they're creating a professional development unit, and the principal. So I've created like an AI video of like a principal giving this directive to these groups as far as like they're creating or they're doing the training for the teachers in their summer programs and things, or their summer training programs. So a lot of different things like that. A lot of my work has been around basically how to help integrate this into the courses, and how to help instructors do the work that do the things that they're already doing in their class, but also have kind of AI as that assistant. So is there any other, am I missing any questions in the chat? Oh, go ahead, Punya, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, Jim just dropped this link to the 15 questions slide deck, Jennifer, that
Thank you.
we had collectively, he gave me credit and I'll take it. No, I won't. It was collectively created. We put our heads together on that. But that's really a good start for somebody who's thinking about, and maybe, Jennifer, you can drop a link to the couple of the other decks that we had created. The one that you had made, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, which was like testing GPT against your own assignments so that you have a better sense of how, amenable it is or easy it is to use it. So I'm mangling it here, so I'll let you describe that. I think that'll be
No, that's okay. Yeah. So one of the things that when we were creating a bunch of information for our faculty to use, one of the things that we were looking at is creating just a little experiment that you can run through with your assignments. Basically, it's putting your assignments into ChatGPT. So it has like the context and the information. You put that all into ChatGPT and have them basically do your assignment. And then you run that output against your rubric. And then and you see where it scores. And then once you get that information, then that can kind of give you a guidance on if you want to change something about your assignment, or if you want to add an additional piece, like a critical thinking type piece or something like that to the assignment that you're already doing. I'm not seeing any more questions, so feel free to unmute or throw them in the chat or whatever if I've missed anything. At the one, I did have one kind of juicy question at the end to ask everybody, to ask our panel was, are you going to be using this again? Like the things that you're doing now, are you going to be using it again? And if so, why or why not?
Yes, this is going to be a permanent part of the Learning Design and Technologies program, and we'll continue to reshape it and build the plane as we fly along, as these technologies inevitably change day over day.
I would definitely say yes. Definitely expanding, looking at some of the other courses within Ed Studies to see how we can incorporate some of the AI pieces into those courses as well. But definitely expanding what we're doing in EDT 180 and refining it. Like Steve said, as the tools change, we're going to change assignments and keep hopefully challenging them.
I mean, I have figured out how to do things like integrate it into e-learning, which is then embedded into the course to provide an introduction for situated assignments. There are some complications with that, but as soon as we figure those out, we'll put them into production.
Yeah, I would add, just as far as thinking about whether we're going to use these, obviously the genie is out of the bottle, as it's been said. But something else for us to think about too is that while it's new to our students that are currently in courses, for those kids that are still in high school, for example, or in middle school right now, once they finally get to college, then not only the tools will have changed and become even more numerous, but then the ways that we use them are going to evolve too. So it really is kind of, I see it as being on us to get out in front of it, as Steve has said, and to continue to look for ways that we can still have fidelity in the learning experience, but at the same time, understand how students can best learn.
And yes, we will be using it. And I'm particularly interested in thinking about role play in the context of what our students are doing. So exploring that more. I do want to just mention one other thing real quickly. ASU, our Ed Leadership program, along with the other major universities in the state, are part of ASA's Higher Ed Division. ASA is the organization of school leaders and district leaders, superintendents, principals, etc., from across the state. And as part of the Higher Ed Division, we are synthesizing research around topics that the superintendents have asked us, so they can use it when they talk to their school boards and also when they lobby their legislators. They've already defined a few of the topics. One of the topics that we're going to get to later this spring, they've asked us to think about, from the superintendent perspective, there's nothing out there that they can find that can help them think about AI policy. Lots of stuff out there about how you can use AI, but they're grappling with AI policy. So we may be knocking on your doors a little later this spring to get some ideas about that to share with our superintendents.
Sure, Carl. So that's great. So please do reach out, because I think Jim can speak to the fact about how SERPI has been sort of looking into this space. So there is that as a resource. There are a couple of things that I've written just recently with Nicole, which might be relevant to this discussion as well. You're absolutely right. There isn't much out there. And, Jim did these focus groups with school leaders. And I think the title of the piece was, can we just make it slow down? Because the things are moving so fast that people are hesitant about creating a policy which tomorrow will get superseded by something else that comes along. So it is a kind of a crazy time, but do reach out. I'm sure there are enough people here in this space at the Teachers College to at least help that conversation.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the time. It's 1 o'clock. Jennifer, thank you so much for hosting. I like this model. So Betty and I have decided that's what we're going to do. Jennifer is going to be hosting every just an hour going forward.
Oh,
thank
good.
you so much.
Oh, goody.
No, this is our last just an hour for the year. So again, thank you everybody so much for joining in every time that you have. This has been really a fun experience for Betty and myself and Gustavo. So just love having you here. And thank you all the people who joined in today and the panelists for sharing your ideas and thoughts. This is a fast-moving space. We will surely revisit again as new things happen. So wish you all a wonderful end of the semester and happy holidays. And I will see you around. Thank you so much.